Hey friends, tell me something. A man who had just 10 years old wrote down a threat to burn his own mother and stepfather alive inside their house. Would you call him a great scientist or a dangerous individual? The same man who at just 22 years old invented an entirely new branch of mathematics purely to mathematically prove gravity. Did he also genuinely believe that a magical stone could make human beings immortal? The man whose discoveries we still rely on today to send spacecraft to the moon and Mars? Did that same man lock himself away in a room for years, secretly practicing alchemy? In today's video, we're going to uncover some deeply unsettling, surprising, and largely unknown truths about the life of Isaac Newton. The man we know from textbooks simply as the discoverer of gravity actually lived a life far more complicated, far darker than most people realize. So stick around till the end, because there's a question waiting for you there that might just change the way you look at Newton forever. Let's get into it. On Christmas Day, 1642, by the Old English calendar. On the Gregorian calendar, that's January 4th, 1643. A baby was born in a small village in England. He was so small and frail that no one expected him to survive. His father, also named Isaac Newton, had died about 3 months before his son was born. His mother, Hannah, was pregnant and widowed. When the baby arrived, she named him after his father. When Newton was 3 years old, his mother remarried, this time to an elderly clergyman. But the clergyman set one condition: young Isaac could not come with her. So his mother left, and Newton was raised by his grandparents instead. This is where his story of isolation begins. He never knew his father, and he lost his mother's presence at a very young age. Historians believe this sense of abandonment shaped the rest of his life, making him unusually suspicious of others, deeply solitary, and almost incapable of tolerating criticism. Even today, a notebook from his teenage years is preserved at the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge. In it, as an act of confession, he listed out what he considered his own sins, and one chilling line among them was that he had thought about burning his mother and stepfather alive, house and all. Now, reading that is genuinely unsettling, but most historians agree this was never an actual plan carried out. It was the raw, unfiltered anger and pain of a hurt child, something he never acted upon. In 1661, at around 18 or 19 years old, Newton enrolled at Trinity College, Cambridge. It was here that he first encountered the work of great thinkers like Galileo, Kepler, and Descartes. But in 1665, disaster struck. The Great Plague. Thousands of people in and around London began dying. The university shut down, and Newton returned to his family home for nearly a year and a half. This period is famously remembered in history as Newton's Annus Mirabilis, his year of wonders, because during this self-imposed isolation, he made one breakthrough after another, laying the foundations of calculus, conducting experiments on the nature of light, and most importantly, beginning to think seriously about gravity. There's a popular story everyone knows, that an apple fell on Newton's head while he sat in a garden, and that's how he discovered gravity. The reality is a bit more nuanced. Newton himself later wrote that seeing an apple fall from a tree in the garden made him wonder, why does it always fall straight down, and never sideways or upward? From this question, he ran a thought experiment. Imagine, he said, firing a cannonball from the top of an extremely tall mountain at tremendous speed. At low speed, the ball would curve and fall to the ground. But if you kept increasing the speed, at some point, the cannonball would keep falling toward the Earth's surface at exactly the same rate the Earth curves away beneath it, meaning it would never actually hit the ground. It would just keep orbiting the planet, exactly the way the moon does. From this thought, he realized something profound. The same force is at work everywhere. The force that pulls an apple to the ground is the exact same force that keeps the moon circling the Earth. He named this force gravity. After the plague ended, Newton returned to Cambridge, completed his master's degree, and became a member of the Royal Society.
the most prestigious gathering of scientists in England at the time. It was here that he crossed paths with Robert Hooke, a brilliant but famously proud scientist who considered himself the leading authority on the nature of light.
Newton presented his first major research to the Royal Society on white light. He proved that white light wasn't pure at all, but actually a mixture of all the colors of the rainbow. To demonstrate this, he used a prism to split white light into its 7 component colors. This discovery completely overturned the accepted scientific thinking of the time, and Robert Hooke could not accept it. He publicly and harshly criticized Newton's theory.
Now remember, Newton had, since childhood, been an extremely emotional person who could not handle criticism. The very first time he shared his work publicly, he was met with fierce attack, and it broke something in him. What happened next is almost unbelievable. Newton withdrew almost entirely from public scientific life. He decided he would never again easily publish his discoveries. In fact, even after developing calculus, he sat on it for years, purely out of fear of criticism.
This later led to a bitter, decades-long dispute with the German mathematician Leibniz over who had actually invented calculus first. Newton essentially imprisoned himself in his small room at Cambridge for the next 14 to 15 years. And it was during this exact period that he became consumed by something that might surprise you. During this isolated period, Newton first threw himself into studying the Bible and theology, but even here, he didn't follow the conventional path. Through years of intense study, he arrived at a conclusion that, if made public in England at the time, could have cost him his position, possibly even landed him in real danger. He came to reject the doctrine of the Trinity, the belief that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are 3 persons in one God. Instead, he privately held a Unitarian belief that God is a single being with no such threefold nature. Living at Trinity College, ironically named, while holding this belief was essentially career suicide if revealed, so Newton kept it secret for his entire life. Thousands of pages of his private theological writings remained unpublished for centuries after his death. But that's not all. During this same period, Newton became deeply immersed in alchemy, the pursuit of transforming matter through what we now call pseudochemistry. In that era, alchemy was considered almost forbidden knowledge, often associated with fraud and deception.
For years, Newton secretly conducted experiments trying to create the Philosopher's Stone, a mythical substance believed to be capable of turning ordinary metals into gold, and which, if its powder were dissolved in water and consumed, was believed to grant immortality. His private notebooks, discovered after his death, contain hundreds of pages of alchemical writings, chemical formulas, coded language, and detailed records of experiments.
Many historians now believe Newton regularly handled mercury during these experiments, which may well have affected both his physical and mental health over time. Just think about that for a moment. The very man who built modern science on logic and evidence secretly believed in a magical stone capable of making people immortal. It's this contradiction that makes Newton such a fascinating, mysterious figure. In 1684, a single event changed the course of Newton's life. His old acquaintance, the astronomer Edmund Halley, traveled to Cambridge specifically to meet him. At the time, several of England's leading scientists suspected that the force governing planetary orbits followed an inverse square law, but none of them could actually prove it mathematically. When Halley asked Newton about it, Newton calmly replied that he had already proven it years earlier. Stunned, Halley asked to see the proof, but Newton couldn't find it among his old papers. At Halley's urging, Newton sat down to work it all out again from scratch. What followed was the most intense period of work in his entire life. Over roughly 18 months, working in near total isolation, often forgetting to eat or sleep, he produced the single most important book of his career, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, known simply today as the Principia.
In this book,
For the first time, he formally laid out his 3 laws of motion and the law of universal gravitation, stating that every object in the universe attracts every other object, with the force depending on their masses and decreasing with the square of the distance between them. Published in 1687, this single book permanently transformed the history of science. To this day, the same laws underpin how we launch rockets, operate satellites, and plan missions to the moon and Mars.
After the Principia was published, Newton overnight became one of the most respected scientists in Europe, but success didn't soften him. If anything, he became even more obsessed with power and settling old scores. In 1696, he was appointed Warden of the Royal Mint, essentially put in charge of England's currency. In this role, he pursued counterfeiters with a ruthlessness that shocked many, and historical records show he was directly involved in sending numerous convicted counterfeiters to the gallows. The same man who, as a child, had once written down threats of violence was now, quite literally, the enforcer of the law. In 1703, he became president of the Royal Society, and many historians believe that once in that position, he ordered the removal of nearly all portraits and records of his old rival, Robert Hooke, from the Society's building. To this day, no verified portrait of Robert Hooke has ever been found.
His dispute with Leibniz over the invention of calculus also reached its peak during this time. Newton secretly formed a Royal Society committee to impartially investigate the matter, except he wrote the committee's final report himself, which, unsurprisingly, ruled entirely in his favor. In 1705, Queen Anne knighted him, making him Sir Isaac Newton, one of the first scientists ever to receive that honor. A lifetime of neglecting his own health, combined with prolonged exposure to various chemicals during his alchemical experiments, likely took a toll he himself may never have fully understood. In 1727, he died at age 84 from complications related to a bladder stone. After his death, researchers uncovered thousands of pages of his private writings on theology, alchemy, and mathematics combined, totaling well over 1 million words, most of which had never been published in his lifetime. Some modern researchers analyzing patterns in his documented behavior have suggested that Newton may have displayed traits consistent with Asperger's syndrome, such as an aversion to social relationships, intense and narrow focus on specific subjects. It remains speculation.
So, friends, who was Newton really? A brilliant scientist or a vengeful, isolated, deeply unusual man? Honestly, he was both. At the same time, his lonely childhood, his inability to handle criticism, his hidden beliefs, all of it pushed him toward discoveries that permanently changed the course of human history. What do you think? Do these darker sides of Newton diminish his scientific achievements? Or do they prove that even the greatest genius often comes from the most complicated of minds? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more fascinating stories from history. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.